Welcome to episode 26 of Lizzie's Bedtime Stories. My storyteller guest is Carsen Taite. We've met once before for a cocktail hour interview when I was a guest host, and I'm really excited to have her on the show. Welcome to the show, Carsen.
Hi, it's great to be here. Hi, Liz. How are you doing?
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
How you doing? Yeah, I'm good. Everything's grand. I had a great weekend. My niecey Poo turned 2.
Awesome.
So she's like, I live in a beach community, so they've been down for almost a week, and it's really nice to have them come and visit.
I have a 6-year-old niece, and she's adorable.
Yeah. My Fiona is really smart, and she's still not, talking a hell of a lot because she's 2, but she's the size of a 3 or 4-year-old, and so people are like, "Why isn't she talking yet?" I said, "She's not ready."
She's too smart to talk out loud. She's talking.
Yeah, no, But the reason why I think I've often worked as a babysitter. And so I'm accustomed to that age, and she has total understanding of what we're saying to her, although she can't feed it back to us, which is, that's just fine. So we have story time, but we have adult story time on Lizzie's Bedtime Stories. Not necessarily adult content, quote unquote, but it's the books for the big kids, and you have 3 readings for us. Is there one in particular you're going to start with, or is it going to, roll the dice and see what happens?
I decided to read from 2 novels and 1 short story. I'm going to do the short story last because it's a horror story, and I just thought it'd be kind of fun to end on a horrific note.
You just warm my heart, Carsen. My heart is just like, she's saving the horror for last.
It's a bedtime story, But I'm going to read the novels in the order they came out. So okay. Beyond Innocence and Battle Axe. So I'm going to read the whole novel.
It's like, feel free to fast forward at moments and, take potty breaks if you're going to read the whole book.
It's like a filibuster.
Yes, we must stop something in particular. I don't know what.
We would like filibusters if people read lesbian fiction.
That would be kind of funny, but there was it wasn't a filibuster, but there was a politician who actually read Green Eggs and Ham.
Yes.
Oh, God, truth is stranger than fiction these days. So
I'm going to read my own works rather than those of someone else.
Totally. So you're going to start with Beyond Innocence?
Yes.
All right. Let our listeners know a little bit of background about the story, and then you can launch into your reading.
Well, I usually tell people it's a love story set in the backdrop of a death penalty case, which sounds kind of odd, I guess. It's a story about 2 women who meet under bizarre circumstance. One of them is an attorney who's working on a death penalty appeal, and the other is the sister of the man who's on death row. And one's a lawyer, of course, because, I have to have a lawyer in every book. Mm-hmm. It's on my contract. And it's just kind of, it gives you a backdrop of how these death penalty appeals work, and then I hope it's a good romance as well. Mm-hmm. So the scene I'm going to read is the opening scene of the book. The lawyer who's working on the death penalty appeal, it's not something she really chose to do, and this just kind of gives a little glimpse into her life.
All right, lay it on us.
All right, I will begin. Page 1. I won't really do that. Okay. Corey Lance didn't spend a lot of time at the back of the courtroom. When she was at work, the well of the courtroom was her showplace. But today, she wasn't working. She wasn't sure if she'd ever be working as a trial attorney again. Dressed in slacks and an open-neck shirt instead of her usual tailored suit, she stood as far away from the TV cameras and as close to the double-door exit as possible. Lots of folks had shown up to see justice in action. more than had shown up for the original trial. Typical. The dead man hadn't had as many friends as the guy now standing in front of the judge. Corey hoped Ray Nelson knew his growing circle of friends was more about the headlines his release would generate than genuine concern for his well-being. Despite Corey's attempts to melt into the background, Julie, her former trial partner, managed to catch her eye and offer a slight nod. Corey resisted smiling in response to the tiny acknowledgement. She hadn't expected any acknowledgement at all. Julie Dalmars looked like she always did, beautiful, confident, and distant. She stood behind the state's council table, ready to bless the agreement that would release Ray Nelson back into the community that had banished him years ago. Not for the first time, Corey wondered why she felt the need to witness this event. Maybe like loved ones who had to see the dead body before burial, she had to see her own destruction to believe it was real. She didn't have to dwell long on her reasons. Judge Yost took the bench and the cameras started rolling. Yost shuffled through the papers in her hand, glancing at the pages more for show than real purpose. This event had been carefully choreographed days in advance. After a few minutes of pretend consideration, the judge set the documents aside and faced Nelson. Mr. Nelson, I have in front of me a motion from your lawyers, signed by your attorneys and the attorneys for the state of Texas. Have you had a chance to review the documents filed on your behalf? Nelson shot a quick glance at the young male attorney at his side before strangling out his confirmation. The attorney was one of a larger group who'd flown in for this event. Corey wondered if they'd drawn straws to decide who got to take center stage. The parties have asked me to dismiss the case against you and commute your sentence. Do you understand what that means? Nelson met her intense gaze and said, I think it means I'll be a free man as soon as you smack that gavel. The courtroom erupted in laughter. Even Julie, who never laughed except at her own jokes, faked a chuckle. Corey inched closer to the exit. It was almost time to go. Yost continued, I don't make a habit of smacking my gavel, but today I think I'll make an exception. She paused and waited until the room grew silent. Mr. Nelson, the judicial system upon which our country was founded has failed you. I still believe that system. I'm a part of it, and I will work as long as I'm on the bench to ensure that system works. The system failed you in the past, but today we will right this wrong. Today we will recognize the misconduct that placed you behind bars and kept you a prisoner for the past 7 years. Corey edged closer to the door. I may not have the power to punish the people who are responsible for your fate, but I do have the power to rectify what happened to you. I accept the order and dismiss the case against you and order the sheriff of Dallas County to release you from custody immediately. She struck her gavel hard against the bench, and the courtroom burst into pandemonium. Corey felt the tide of excitement course through the crowd, and she almost became caught up in the frenzy until she heard a man on the row in front of her ask his seatmate, Isn't that Corey Lance? She slipped out the door before he could turn his head. This show was over for her. I'll stop there.
Okay. This is a very complex book, y'all. Bless Corey's heart. She had to be there. Bless her heart. Very complex book, which I won't get into at this point, but I definitely recommend you give it a whirl if your thing is some lawyer action or some hard justice stuff. And it's quite illustrious. And you have another book that is very snappy and also happens to have some Law and Order folks in there, and you're reading from Battle Axe.
Yes, I'm going to read the opening scene again. Well, this opening scene. I'm just going to read what I read over and over. Battle Axe is the second in a series about a bounty hunter named Luca Bennett. It's written in the first person, which is a departure from my other works, and it's different. It's not a romance per se, although there are romantic elements, and it's been a lot of fun to write inside Luca's head. Mm-hmm. Bounty hunters, in case you don't know any, tend to be people who operate a little outside the law, and that's I write a lot about lawyers who operate inside the law, so it's been kind of fun to write about the folks who are on the fringes. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to jump into the opening scene. I don't think it requires any explanation.
No, I think we're set up suitably, and I will sit back and let you read me story. So go ahead.
I don't think I'd ever seen a bigger burger. The guy in the booth across from me grasped it with both hands, but they were no match for the 1.5 pounds of meat and 15 bacon slices sandwiched between 2 buns. A triple bypass. I wasn't sure if I'd ever been that hungry. My guy ordered a double bypass. Only 1 patty less, but it didn't look nearly as daunting. I know I'd been that hungry. Hell, I was that hungry now. He tacked on a side of flatliner fries, a buttermilk milkshake, and a pack of Lucky Strikes. I shook my head. He wouldn't eat like that in the joint. Not only was I earning a living by picking him up, I was saving him from himself. I was practically a good Samaritan. I waited in my seat until he hefted the large bag and waddled from the restaurant. Excellent. I thought I'd have to wait drooling while he finished off his meal and then lit up a few cancer sticks. When I saw him turn toward the parking lot, I made my move. My strides were like 4 of his, and it didn't take me long to catch up to him. Excuse me, sir. He turned toward me, clutching the bag against his hefty middle. Can I help you? He edged away as he spoke the words. If I had to guess, he was more scared about losing his lunch than he was about being caught by the law. I work for Hardin Jones. I need to talk to you about the court date you missed last week. I barely got the last words out of my mouth before he took off running. All 300-plus pounds of him shook like jelly as he tore across the parking lot, dodging pedestrians and cars alike. I'd taken his size for granted, figured he was an easy mark, but he was a tornado, and I quickly realized I'd have to push hard to catch him. As I sprinted toward him, he risked a backward glance, which is probably why he didn't see the car careening toward him. I did, but I charged ahead anyway, pulling up short, just as he glanced off the front bumper. He staggered a little, but then charged forward again, gripping the bag from the heart attack grill like it was his last meal. The way he was running, it might very well be. I wished I'd had on tennis shoes instead of heavy boots, but my next meal was at risk too, so I accelerated my speed and pulled along beside him. You're making things worse, I yelled. Don't care, he huffed, but I could tell he was losing steam. Still, I wasn't in the mood to spend all day chasing a fat man through the streets of downtown Dallas. We were near the famous grassy knoll, a perfect place for a comfortable landing. I pulled up short and crouched. He looked over his shoulder, probably wondering why I could no longer hear my pounding pace. When he saw me standing in place, he grinned, but as I leapt through the air, I watched his grin change to dismay. My Olympic jump took him so by surprise he remained rooted in place until I landed on his back and took him to the ground. We rolled, and I took advantage of being on top of him to whip out a pair of handcuffs and secure them to one of his wrists. The other wrist was connected to the hand, still clutched to the bag, and he wasn't letting go. After a struggle, I managed to snap the steel bracelet in place and worked on prying his fingers loose from the bag, finally tearing the brown paper just below his grasp. When I pulled the bag away, I thought he might cry. As I marched him away, I heard 1,000 tiny clicks, and I turned back to check it out. A band of tourists was snapping pictures of our little incident. I smiled and bowed for the camera. Okay.
Fantastic. That was one of my favorite parts when I was reading the novel. I was like, that is so awesome. Look, the grassy knoll, and somebody's getting nabbed.
I know. Well, the grassy knoll's a happening place in Dallas. You think I'm kidding, but I'm actually not.
It's a hangout. I missed it at GCLS then.
Oh, well, next time I'll take you down there.
Sweet. So you've saved the horror for last.
I have. I'm not going to read this whole story, but I'm just going to give you a taste. This book came out, Night Shadows, Queer Horror. This book came out last year in October for Halloween. It's edited by Greg Heron and J.M. Redman, two fabulous writers who, whenever they ask me to contribute a story to something, I always say yes, even though I had never written horror before and had no clue what I would write for this. So I wanted to figure out a way to work a lawyer in, which most people wouldn't think would be hard in a horror story. So my story is called The Zealous Advocate, and I'm just going to read the opening scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really think I think any introduction might spoil it.
Okay.
All right, so I tugged my knife through the steak, not a hint of red. I despise when waiters refuse to believe I want a bloody piece of meat. I tossed the knife onto the tablecloth. Is something wrong? My beautiful date didn't have a clue how long I could rail about the things that had gone wrong this past week. The list was extensive, and the overdone steak was the smallest of my worries. But at that very moment, it was the only problem I could fix, and I would fix it. Not to worry, I'll have this taken care of in a jiffy. I called out to the tuxedoed waiter as he attempted to ostrich his way past our table. Yes, ma'am, what can I do for you? Ma'am, hate the word. When you asked me if I was sure I wanted my porterhouse rare, I said absolutely. Isn't that true? He shuffled in place, but answered, yes, ma'am. And do you recall how you went on to describe that a rare steak would have a cool, red, bloody center? Yes, ma'am. But I held up a hand. Please just answer the question, yes or no. And you recall that when you described a red and bloody center, I responded, yes, that would be perfect. Isn't that true? He hung his head. Yes, ma'am. I seized the knife and ripped through the wasted fillet. This isn't bloody and red, is it? No, ma'am, it's well done. I let his extra words go unchecked and shoved the plate to the edge of the table. Please remove this offensive meal and bring me what I ordered, and stop calling me ma'am. He grabbed the plate and his head bobbed up and down. Yes, ma'am. Yes, right away. Sheila leaned across the table, her large bosom heaving on her own plate, against her own plate. You think you might have been a little hard on him? I like what I like. Something wrong with that? I licked my lips to signal she was on my list of likes. She shook her head, her blonde waves tilting. No, baby, nothing wrong with that. Is that how you are in the courtroom, all badass and in control? If only she knew. Pretty much, but I have to say that I do my best work outside the courtroom. I risked a slow glance at my wristwatch. I had some work to do later tonight, in fact. Maybe you could show me after dinner, she said. I can play disruptive juror and you can put some order in my court. From your lips, sweetheart. There was a time when I sought the company of women who weren't such, well, bimbos. But after a while, I discovered the complete lack of curiosity and reflection was actually a bonus. I had too many places to be and people to see in my chosen work. I couldn't afford to spend time with ladies who had the wherewithal to notice my odd comings and goings. Our waiter didn't waste any time serving my new meal, a feat made easy since the steak wasn't actually cooked. I sliced effortlessly through the raw meat and salivated at the trail of blood my knife left smeared across the plate. I used to hate the smell of blood. Its heavy metallic odor clung to my skin, filled my nostrils, and covered all of my senses for hours after a particularly messy encounter. But not long after the first time, I began to appreciate how the odor reeked of victory. Reliving the sensation of mealtime was a symbol of how necessary it had come in my life. I ate every bite. I waited until Sheila ordered dessert before I feigned an emergency call and made well-practiced excuses. I made idle promises about meeting her later for real dessert, but I couldn't guarantee it. I knew exactly what I had to do and how long it would take, but every case was different. I'd learned long ago not to assume the work would go as planned. The alley was dark. No surprise there. I'd scouted this place and knew every crevice of the wretched strip of crumbling buildings. This part of town wasn't on anyone's radar, at least not now. In a week, the place would be crawling with spectators looking for clues, looking for news. My client didn't want to wait, but I'd warned him I wouldn't guarantee results unless he followed my instructions to the letter. A few weeks in a cell was a fair trade for a lifetime of freedom. I pushed open the large steel door and crept into the storeroom. As sure as I was no one was around, I didn't risk a flashlight until I stumbled into the bundle I'd left and made certain it was where I'd left it. She was still unconscious, close to death, but just far enough away to allow me the final maneuvers. This one would be the last. I'd had to stalk this one for a week before I'd found the perfect moment. In court all day and in the streets all night, the work had taken its toll. When I first started taking these cases, I was young, and I had the stamina to handle the work. Now the heavy lifting, the gruesome mess, the keen attention to detail all left me aching, sore, and mentally drained for weeks after the act. And the cleanup. I despised the cleanup, removing all traces of my presence, while assuring that every discoverable detail was perfect. 4 years of college, 3 years of law school, 20 years in practice, and I couldn't get away from cleaning up other people's messes. The toil was worth it. My father, damn his soul, was likely tossed in his grave as I took my best revenge, being better at the law than his chosen heir, my older brother. Michael had chosen to give his talents away rather than take the reins of Daddy's thriving practice. While he defended the rights of humanity in some God-forsaken land, I did real work. Grueling, but profitable. Very profitable. Reminiscing wasn't part of my plan. I set aside reflection and drew the plastic bag, string, and professional boning knife from my bag, while mentally chanting the details I'd memorized. 7 cuts now, 7 cuts after. I brought a book to read for the in-between time. She wouldn't wake up. I perfected that part of the process for the cases that demanded no sign of a struggle in the final moments. I liked those best. Less chance of leaving something of myself behind. The ribbons of blood were almost pretty. I watched as the trickles flowed down her side, but when the trail ended, I wasted no time placing the bag over her head and tying the string tightly around her neck. Eerie how the plastic drew in and out around her features. The shallow breaths were the only sign of life left. I imagined I could get a few chapters in before it was time to cut again. I shined the light on the latest Grisham novel and drank in the sameness of his storytelling. Ritual is comforting. That's it. That's all I'm gonna.
Dun dun dun. Well, she has quite the interesting side business going on there.
Well, it's all related. It's all part of, her zealous advocacy. It's like a bonus you get when you hire her.
Oh my God, she terrifies me.
And you should be terrified.
Mission accomplished. So, Miss Carsen Taite, I want to thank you for coming to tell these 3 different beginnings of stories, which is, quite the teaser. Can you remind my listeners, once again, the 3 things that they need to pick up now that they've listened to just the taste?
Absolutely. Beyond Innocence, Battle Axe, and the anthology Night Shadows, Queer Horror. Horror.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I have a feeling I'm going to see you in a future episode.
Excellent. I look forward to it.